Today we're going to talk about slope-intercept form. Right? Slope-intercept form is a way that you can write an equation that makes it really easy to graph. Right? And we learned yesterday about slope. We know how to find slope. Right? Today, now we can graph equations based off this form right here. And this is what you need to memorize. Y equals mx plus b. Memorize it because you will use it for the rest of this year. You will use it for the rest of next year. You'll use it on and on and on. Y equals mx plus b. The things you need to know, the two things about it you need to know is that b is the number that's by itself. The number that's lonely, the number that's just off to the side. It's either going to say plus b or minus b. That is what we say is the y-intercept, which you know what the y-intercept is. We've talked about how to find the y-intercept. The y-intercept is just the point where the line crosses the y-axis. And that's what we use as our starting point. That's the reason why we're talking about b first. The b is your starting point. So you look at what number b is, and that is where you go on the y-axis and you put a dot. All right, which we're going to do several examples of that. M, what you notice about M is that it's in front of x. M is times by x. M is your slope, which we know about slope. We learned about slope yesterday. It's defined as rise over run, the change in y over the change in x. And it is being multiplied by x. So that is how you're going to know the difference. Because today they're going to give you equations like y equals 3x plus 1. And it's going to say find the slope and find the y-intercept. How do you know the difference? Well, here's how you know the difference. B is the number that's by itself. M is the number that's being times by x. Now, a lot of people will say it's 3x. X is not your slope. X is never a slope. X is actually an x-coordinate. It is just being times by your slope. So don't ever say that your slope is mx or 3x or 4x. It is just the number that's in front of x. Okay? If, there's a couple things that I just need to talk about. If m is not there, if all it says, let's say the equation says y equals x, then your slope is 1. If m is not there, if there's not a number in front of x, then your slope is 1. If there's not an x in the equation, then your slope is 0. We're going to do a couple of those problems, and you'll see those. So hopefully that'll reinforce what I'm saying. But if there's not an x, then your slope is 0. What kind of line has a slope of 0? Do you guys remember? Horizontal line has a slope that's 0. So if you don't see an x in the equation, then you know it's a horizontal line. Okay? And we're going to do several of those later on. The only other thing you need to see, if there's not a b, if it just says y equals 4x, what would be your b? 0. Your starting point would be the origin, 0, 0. Okay? If there's not a y-intercept, if it doesn't say plus 1 or plus 2 or minus 4, then it's 0. Okay? Here's what you need to do. You need to write down, find the slope and y-intercept. You need to write down the equations. You need to write down the m equals and b equals. And then get your graph ready because we're going to graph these. So first thing I want to do is find the slope and y-intercept. That's what it's going to ask you. There's going to be some problems that just ask you to find the slope and y-intercept. Then there's going to be problems that say graph this equation. Well, you have to do both of these. Like you have to be able to find slope and y-intercept to be able to graph. So I've just combined two types of problems. So some problems will just say this. Some problems will just have a graph. That's your graph. Okay. Y equals 3x plus 1. Kurt, what would be my m? 3, the number in front of x. Good. Cheyenne, what would be my b? 1. Good. Right. My slope, my m is 3. Right. My b is 1. Now if it's, we'll talk about it here in a second. What I'm going to do is now I'm going to graph this. Sometimes it'll just say graph y equals 3x plus 1. What I do is I look at b first. And I go to that point on the y-axis. So I go to 1 on the y-axis, I put a dot. And then I look at my slope. My slope is usually a fraction, but in this case it's not. I can make it a fraction though. What can I make 3? How can I make 3 into a fraction? What, Kurt?
3 over 1.
I could write 3 over 1. Now it's a fraction. So, and we learned how to do slope yesterday. We know that 3 would be my rise and 1 would be my run. We always go to the right to start out. So what I do is I go up 3 points and I go over 1 and I put a dot. Up 3 over 1. Then I do it again. Up 3. So from 4 I should end up at 7 and I go over 1. I do that as many times as I can, but I can't. I could go one more if I wanted to, right there. Up 3 over 1. What you really need to do is just do at least 2 one direction, 2 the other direction. Have 3 or 4 dots on a line, enough that you can figure out what the line looks like. Sometimes you run out of space. Like I can't go up 3 over 1 anymore. So what I do is I go backwards. I start back at 1 and I go down 3. And instead of going to the right one, I go to the left one. So I go down 3 over 1. And then I do it again. I go down 3 over 1. All right. I think I have enough that I could draw a line, so I draw my line. Now, I think it asks you to graph like 8 or 9 different lines, which there's only like 8 graphs on your homework, the graph paper that I'm going to give you. So a couple of them you'll have to combine. So what I want you to do is if you're going to put 2 graphs or 2 equations on one, just label this one. So I'd label this one y equals 3x plus 1. And I would just label the line with the equation. And then I can do it with a different one. I can write another line on here. Brittany, what would be my m for y equals 1/4 x minus 6? 1/4. The number in front of x is my m, my slope. Sierra, what would be my b?
6.
Okay, it's 6, but yet it's not 6. Okay, it's not positive 6 because let's think back to the original equation. We call it the parent function. Y equals mx plus b. What's different about this compared to y equals mx plus b? This says minus 6, doesn't it? Instead of plus 6. So my b would not be 6, it would be negative 6. Okay? Sometimes they'll write plus negative 6, but not very often. Usually they'll just replace the plus sign with a minus sign and write minus 6. If you see minus 6, you have to think it's negative 6. So I go to the dot that's at negative 6 on the y. So everybody do that. Negative 6 on the y. And then Isabel, what would I do from here? What's my slope of this line? What was m? What did we say what m was? 1/4. So my slope is what? Okay, so what would I go? Where would I go from this point at negative 6? If my slope is 1/4. What would be my rise? How many units do I go up? 1, and then how many units do I go to the right? 4. So I go up 1 over 4. Good. And I do it again. I go up 1 and I go over 4. Can I keep going that way, Isabel? No, I ran out of room. So I go the other direction. So instead of going up 1, I would go what? Down 1. And instead of going 4 to the right, I go 4 to the left. So I go down 1 over 4. And I can do that one or a couple times until I get enough points that I can draw a line. Put your arrow signs, and then I'm just going to label it. So I'm just going to write y equals 1/4 x minus 6. So I know which one's which on my homework, on my graph. Right. Any questions how to do that? Pretty simple, right? Alright, write down y equals negative 2x, m equals b equals, and write down y equals negative 2/3 x plus 3. The first one says y equals negative 2x. So Alan, what would be my m? Negative 2. Which if I wanted to write that as a fraction, what would I write? Negative 2 over 1, good. Ben, what would be my b? 0. If there's not a plus a number, if there's not minus a number, then it's 0. So where would I start at, Ben?
You'd start out at the 0.
At the 0 on the y. Okay, what we call the origin. 0, 0. Jaden, where would I go from 0, 0? Using my slope, right? I've graphed my y-intercept. Now using my slope, which we said is what, Jaden?
Negative 2 over 1.
Okay, where would I go from 0, 0? Like, what would I do?
You would go down 2 over 1.
Down 2 over 1, right there. So I'd end up right there. And then I keep doing it. I'd go down 2 over 1 again. I'd do that 3 or 4 times, which I went a little too far. I would do that a couple times at least, just to get an idea. And then I go backwards. So, Jaden, where would I go from 0, 0?
Up 2 over 1.
Up 2 over 1. Right, I go to the left. All right, I've got at least 3 or 4 points, so enough that I can graph it. So I just draw a line through it, put my arrows, and I want to label it y equals negative 2x. I want you guys to do y equals negative 2/3 x plus 3. All right, go ahead, write out what m and b are, put it on a graph, label it, and then you're going to compare it to what I do here in a minute. Y equals negative 2/3 x plus 3. So my m, my slope, is the number that touches x. It's in front of x, so it's negative 2/3. That means it goes up 2 over 3 every time. My b is the number that's by itself, so that's 3. So I go to that point on the y, I start at 3. I put a dot, and then I go with my slope. I look at my slope. It's negative 2/3. That means I'm going to go down 2 over 3. Now that's why I always say go to the right first, so you know if it's going down and to the right or up and to the right, based on if the top number is negative or positive. So then I go down 2 over 3 again. Then I go backwards. I go up 2 over 3. And I do it, maybe one more time. Enough that I can see the line start to form. And I graph it. And I'm going to label it as y equals negative 2/3 x plus 3. Now here's a couple more problems where they just want you to find slope and y-intercept. If it doesn't say graph, you don't have to worry about graphing. But here, just as find slope and y-intercept, the difference in why I've thrown these on here is because they're not written in slope-intercept form, are they? Slope-intercept form is always y equals mx plus b. Y is always by itself with slope-intercept form. These are not written in slope-intercept form. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rewrite them in slope-intercept form. I know how to rearrange things. I know how to move things from one side to the other. I know how to get variables by itself. We've been practicing that since chapter 2. So that's what we're going to do here. My goal is to get what by itself, Ben? Y. Because once it's y equals, then I can figure out what the slope is and what the y-intercept is. But until it's y equals, I can't do that. So Ben, what would I do first here? How would I get y by itself?
You'd subtract from 2.
If I want to get y by itself, I'm looking at what's being done to y. Am I adding 2 to y? What am I doing to it?
You're adding 4, negative
I'm adding negative 4x to it. So how would I get rid of negative 4x?
Minus.
I wouldn't subtract 4x because it's already negative. That wouldn't get rid of it. What's the opposite of negative 4x? I would add it. So I would add 4x to both sides. In doing that, it moves it over because if it's negative 4x on one side, it's positive 4x on the other. Alright. And now I have y equals, which I'm going to rearrange this. You could write it as 2 plus 4x, but I'm going to rearrange it to where it's in slope-intercept form, and it's 4x plus 2. Sometimes it's hard to write with this. 4x plus 2. Brittany, what would be my m? 4. Right, not the x. The x is wrong. If you write 4x, it's wrong. The x is not the slope. The x just identifies a slope. You use x to find the slope. Sierra, what would be b?
2.
It is 2. Good. The number by itself is always 2. Is always b. The y-intercept. William, how would I get y by itself here? Y minus 5 is equal to negative x.
Add 5.
I would add 5 both sides. Good. Y is equal to negative x plus 5. Leah, what's my m?
5.
No.
0.
No. What did I say if x doesn't have a number in front of it? What is it? Do you remember?
No. 1.
It's 1. Right? But is this one 1?
No.
Because this is negative x. So what would be my m be?
Negative.
Negative 1. Kind of a trick question there. Okay? What is the number in front of x? Well, there's not one. Well, if there's not a number in front of x, then it's 1, unless there's a negative sign up front, then it'd be negative 1. Okay? It's not 0 unless there's not an x. Okay? If that just said y equals 5, then what would your m be? 0. Okay? If there's not an x, then it would be 0. But here there's an x, so it's that number that's in front. Which we know if there's not a number in front of a variable, then it's 1. Okay? In case it's a negative sign in front, then it's negative 1. Kendall, what's my b? 5. There you go. That's all you got to do. Any questions? All right, here's your homework assignment for today.